Most people, the sleeping masses, they live in a state of constant, manufactured fear. They look out into the world and they see shadows. They believe, with absolute, pathetic certainty, that their greatest threat is a powerful enemy. They scan the horizon for aggressive competitors. They brace themselves against open critics. They build fortress to protect against obvious opposition, but they are looking in the wrong direction. The herd is always looking in the wrong direction, in the real world. The brutal architecture of the mind dictates a different truth. You do not lose power because someone else is stronger than you. Strength is an illusion, a temporary, shifting state. You lose your empire, your leverage, your sovereignty, because you, quietly and voluntarily, hand over the keys. You make your enemy stronger, not on the battlefield, not through grand, cinematic confrontations, and certainly not through direct conflict. You arm them through exposure. Every single time you open your mouth to reveal too much, you are bleeding. Every time you react with raw, unfiltered emotion, you are handing them a loaded weapon. Every time you allow your behavioral patterns to become obvious, you are drawing a map directly to your throat. The herd calls this authenticity. They celebrate it. But the moment someone can read you, the exact second your internal state becomes visible on your face, they can manage you. They can control you. They own you. This is the foundational architecture of power, the supreme principle understood by the masters of old and completely ignored by the weak. Power, true, terrifying power, does not shift when someone launches an attack against you. An attack is just noise. Power shifts irreversibly the moment you allow yourself to become predictable, because predictability creates absolute control. Think about the predators and the prey. If the masses know what hurts you, they know exactly where to press their thumbs. If they observe how you fracture under pressure, they possess the precise formula to provoke you. If they are allowed to understand the pathetic rhythm of your emotional patterns, they know how to move you like a pawn, without ever using physical force. And this is the most dangerous, insidious part of the game. Power is almost never lost in a sudden, violent collapse. That is a myth sold to the sheep to keep them docile. Power erodes. It rots, slowly, almost invisibly. It is bled out through small, desperately visible behaviors. It evaporates through your compulsive need to overshare. It dies in your quick, defensive reactions. It is buried under your unnecessary, frantic explanations. You engage in emotional exposure that feels so warm, so honest. But it is nothing more than strategic suicide. The matrix we live in, the fragile ecosystem built to pacify the 99%, conditions them to believe that their openness makes them authentic. Society, the ultimate architect of weakness, whispers that sharing every broken piece of yourself makes you trustworthy. They are told it makes them relatable. They are told it makes them strong. It is a brilliant, devastating lie designed to keep you at their level. Good intentions are nothing but raw meat to strategic observers. The issue here, the fatal flaw, is not honesty itself. Honesty can be a weapon if wielded correctly. The issue is undisciplined, reckless honesty. There is a vast, unbridgeable void between being real and being easily readable. There is a brutal dichotomy between standing authentic and standing totally exposed. You must recognize the chasm between operating with transparency and actively handing your enemies a detailed inventory of your deepest vulnerabilities. Step into any competitive arena. It does not matter if it is the social hierarchy, the corporate bloodbath, or the private battlegrounds of your personal life. In these spaces, information is not just data. Information is leverage. It is currency. It is ammunition. And every single time you choose to reveal your internal instability, your quiet fears, your carefully hidden emotional triggers, or the chaotic internal conflicts you have not yet processed, you are committing treason against your own empire. You give the predators an advantage they did not earn. They did not have to hunt for it. You placed it directly in their hands. This transmission, this recalibration of your mind, is not about telling you to become a hollow, unfeeling machine. It is not about forcing you to wear a fake, plastic mask. It is absolutely not about hiding the core of who you are out of fear. This is about ascending to a higher state of being. This is about discipline, cold, calculating, psychological discipline. It is about the mastery of strategic visibility. It is about the lethal art of controlled disclosure. You are about to learn the precise mistakes that quietly elevate the herd above you. Mistakes that feel like honesty, but act like poison. The first fatal error of the fragile mind is the weakness that destroys empires from within, is the public exhibition of an unresolved struggle. The masses have been infected with a toxic, paralyzing ideology. They are programmed by the Matrix to believe that bleeding in the town square builds connection. They drag their open, infected wounds into the digital light, hoping the wolves will offer them a bandage. It is a pathetic, suicidal display. There is a terrifying, unbridgeable gap between sharing a conquered lesson and displaying a raw, active vulnerability. Most cannot see the difference until the trap snaps shut. Timing is the ultimate arbiter of power. If you speak of the storm while the rain is still washing away your foundations, your tone carries the undeniable stench of instability. Your words tremble with a hidden uncertainty. Your emotional state is naked, unconsciously begging the herd for validation, for a fleeting moment of reassurance. And they smell it. Even as they offer you empty, polite sympathy, their primitive brains are actively re-evaluating your worth. Influence requires the absolute, monolithic illusion of unshakable stability. When they sense the chaos vibrating within you, your authority fractures. They no longer see a king. They see a casualty waiting to happen. Never broadcast your active wars. Consider the brutal dichotomy. There is the conqueror who stands at the summit and says, "I walked through the fire, and this is how I forged the ashes into a weapon." And there is the victim who cries from the pit, "I am burning, and I do not know how to stop the pain." One narrative demands absolute submission. The other invites eventual slaughter. When you process your pain in public, you are actively handing your emotional coordinates to silent, strategic observers. They index your fears. They store your doubts. And when the arena inevitably demands a sacrifice, they will use your own recorded weaknesses as leverage to crush you. Process your chaos in the dark. The void is your only confidant. Speak only when the architecture of your mind is fully restored and weaponized. The second silent killer, the poison swallowed by the naive, is the catastrophic delusion of universal fairness. This is the fastest, most efficient method to arm your opposition. You look at the gritty reality of human nature through the distorted lens of your own constructed morality. You believe, with a blinding, childish naivety, that if you operate with balance, with honor, with pure intentions, the world will mirror your grace. It will not. Humans do not operate on noble ideals. The herd is driven by cold, mechanical, selfish incentives. Some hunt for immediate advantage. Some hoard opportunity for survival. When you project your civilized, high-minded standards onto a creature of instinct, you fatally miscalculate the battlefield. And a miscalculation is an open invitation for destruction. This specific weakness always manifests as premature trust. The herd compromises early. They surrender their own territory simply to demonstrate good faith. They reveal their hand early to prove they are not hiding a blade. They take one step back, assuming the enemy will step forward to meet them in harmony. But the strategic observer does not see goodwill. They see a collapsing perimeter. Your desperate attempt at fairness becomes raw, actionable data. They learn exactly how much pressure is required to make you yield. They map the exact threshold of your psychological breaking point. And once they possess that map, they no longer negotiate with you. They simply manage you. Stop expecting wolves to eat grass. The sovereign mind does not begin any interaction with trust. It begins with clinical, detached observation. Watch how they move when the resources shrink. Watch their character mutate when the tension spikes. Anyone can wear the mask of a saint when the sun is shining, but character is forged and exposed. Strictly under the crushing weight of pressure, never offer the first concession. Hold your space with a chilling, immovable stillness. Let them expose their hunger first. Let their incentives reveal themselves while you remain an unreadable monolith. The third, invisible trap. The architecture of silent defeat is the immediate, visceral reaction to the subtle provocation. Not all acts of war are announced with thunder. The most lethal, surgical strikes are entirely quiet. A microscopic shift in their tone, a perfectly timed interruption, a lingering, dismissive glance, a casual joke that slides a millimeter too deep under your skin. The sheep brush these off as unfortunate accidents. They are not accidents. They are highly calibrated, deliberate tests. They are probing the electric fences of your psychological fortress. They do not want a grand, messy conflict. They want to study the tremor in your voice, because a reaction reveals your sensitivity, and your sensitivity is the exact lever they will pull to break you later. The weak falsely believe that power must be loud. They jump immediately to defend their fragile egos. They correct the insult. They frantically over-explain their position. They shift their physical posture to prove they were deeply affected. But the exact fraction of a second your emotional state breaches the surface, your internal data is permanently compromised. They do not care about the logic of your defensive words. They are studying the raw machinery of your soul. If a tiny barb shifts your energy, they have found the fatal crack in the armor. If you rush to protect your status, they know exactly where to aim the killing blow. Once the trigger is mapped, they will move you like a puppet without ever needing to raise their voice. True, terrifying power lives exclusively in the dead space of the delayed response. When the subtle poison is fired at you, you do not swallow it. You let it hang in the dead air. You pause. You observe the architect of the insult with the cold, dead eyes of a predator analyzing its prey. Calm, suffocating neutrality destroys their entire strategy. It starves them of the emotional data they so desperately crave. Silence, when wielded as a conscious, heavy weapon, is not submission. It is absolute, psychological dominance. Let them drown in their own unacknowledged aggression. The fourth fatal error, the sickness of the insecure mind, is the compulsion to over-explain your decisions. The herd operates under a pathetic, desperate delusion. They blindly believe that if they just pour out enough words, if they stack enough fragile context, if they vomit enough background information, the world will finally understand them. They repeat their logic like a beggar asking for coins. They are terrified of silence, so they fill the void with endless, suffocating justifications. They pray that absolute clarity will buy them the acceptance they desperately crave from the sheep. But they are entirely wrong. Excessive explanation does not build an empire of authority. It actively dismantles it, brick by agonizing brick. The dark psychology of the over-explanation is a transmission of absolute surrender. Beneath the flood of words, there is a hidden, screaming message. It says, "I am weak, and I need your permission to exist. I need you to agree with my reality." The precise fraction of a second, your voice shifts from an iron declaration to a plea for validation. Your throne crumbles. You become a peasant, begging the court for approval. The predators in the room, the silent observers, immediately sense the rot of uncertainty. They smell the blood of your hesitation. And it does not matter if your final choice was flawlessly correct. Your psychological posture has already collapsed into the mud. True sovereign authority is never measured by the exhausting length of your justifications. The kings of this world do not explain themselves to the slaves. Authority is measured by the terrifying, immovable confidence of a single, clear, definitive statement. When your choices are buried under mountains of desperate reassurances and redundant clarifications, the herd does not hear your logic. They only hear your trembling hesitation. And hesitation is blood in the water. It is an open, engraved invitation for the wolves to challenge your reign. A king speaks once. The silence that follows is his enforcer. By vomiting your internal thought process, you unlock a door that should have remained sealed shut. You invite the peasants into the war room. When you lay out every single piece of your reasoning, you give them the tools to dismantle your decree. They stop respecting the final outcome. They begin to pick apart the fragile details of your exposed mind. Why this path? Why not that? Option. What about our feelings? You have effectively stripped yourself of your crown. You have downgraded your absolute direction into a pathetic, democratic debate. Never negotiate your reality. State the outcome. Let the void absorb their petty questions. The fifth trap, The architecture of self-inflicted destruction is the public branding of your own weaknesses. The sleepers are infected with the disease of modern humility. They have been brainwashed into believing that performing psychological self-mutilation in front of the crowd makes them relatable. They eagerly step onto the stage and declare, "I am broken." They loudly announce, "I am weak under pressure. I am terrible at this." They operate under the tragic, laughable illusion that admitting their failures makes them appear grounded. They think it proves their self-awareness. They think the herd will love them for their honesty. They are digging their own graves with a smile on their faces. There is a lethal, inescapable danger in holding the pen that writes your own limitations. When you assign a label of weakness to your own identity, you are not merely sharing a fleeting, harmless thought. You are forging the iron chains of your own narrative, and the moment that narrative breaches your lips, it ceases to belong to you. The predators in the room catch it. They store it in the dark archives of their minds. The collective consciousness of the herd does not remember the warm, fuzzy context of your confession. They do not care about the human emotion that made you speak. They only remember the label, the brand, the absolute, unshakable weakness. When the wheel of power turns, when the ultimate evaluations for dominance, trust, and massive opportunity arise, that exact label will rise from the void to strangle you. It will quietly, ruthlessly poison their judgment against you. They will not hand you the keys to the kingdom. And the most beautiful, devastating tragedy of it all is that they are not actively trying to destroy you. You did the dirty work for them. You carefully defined the exact boundaries of your own cage. You repeated the lie until it became a fixed, undeniable trait. And fixed traits dictate the absolute ceiling of your existence. You handed them the exact blueprint of your incompetence. Never forget the dark mechanics of the game. There are entities moving through the world, apex predators disguised as colleagues and friends, who actively harvest the insecurities of the weak. It is their currency. When you casually vomit your fears onto the table, when you list your shortcomings to appear human, you are handing them the master key to your destruction. You are drawing a highly detailed, illuminated map leading directly to your softest vulnerabilities. In the inevitable crossfire of competition, those precise insecurities will be weaponized against you. Information that felt like a warm bonding moment is now the cold blade pressing against your throat. Never define your darkness to the light. Shift the frame. Speak of the brutal evolution. Speak of the process, but never brand yourself with the iron of defeat. The sixth trap, the ultimate betrayal of your own sovereignty, is granting access to your fortress far too quickly. Access is not a polite greeting. Access is raw, concentrated influence. The exact individuals who are permitted to consume your time, who are allowed to drain your attention, who are granted a glimpse into your personal thoughts and your hidden emotional world. These parasites dictate your absolute psychological position. But the desperate masses, the starving herd, they throw open the heavy iron gates of their minds without a second of hesitation. They are completely, pathetically blind to the devastating, long-term cost of their actions. In the fragile beginning of any human connection, there is a shallow, dangerous curiosity. The sheep desperately want to feel understood. They crave to be accepted. They hunger to feel a false, manufactured sense of closeness, to artificially create that warm, sickening feeling of intimacy. The weak vomit their personal details almost immediately. They strip themselves naked emotionally. They eagerly broadcast their dark history, their private struggles, their deepest, most paralyzing fears. They lay out their secret ambitions and their most guarded private experiences, all within a terrifyingly short, undisciplined window of time. To their untrained, primitive minds, this massive hemorrhage of information feels like a genuine connection. It masquerades as unbreakable trust. But fast, uncontrolled emotional exposure does not build a foundation. It only creates a pathetic, shimmering illusion of depth. It builds absolutely zero real stability. True, unbreakable trust is a heavy architecture, built strictly through grueling, tested consistency over brutal amounts of time. When you hand over the keys to your mind before a target has proven their absolute reliability in the fire, you are gambling your empire. You are heavily investing your irreplaceable emotional value, with absolutely zero concrete evidence of their underlying character. And you must understand this fundamental law of the game. Once a predator gains deep, unobstructed insight into your internal mechanics, once they map your core motivations and precisely locate your softest vulnerabilities, your entire psychological dominance evaporates. They now understand you. And in the dark reality of human nature, understanding is the exact definition of leverage. The architecture of the human brain dictates a devastating truth about value perception. The mind only respects what it cannot easily possess. It strictly assigns supreme importance based on artificial scarcity and agonizing effort. When you freely distribute your personal information, when your emotional openness and your undivided attention are surrendered immediately on a silver platter, they immediately become worthless. They feel disgustingly ordinary, rather than profound or meaningful. The target did not have to bleed to earn your presence. They did not have to pass a single, grueling test to prove their worth. And the immutable law of the world remains. Whatever is captured effortlessly is inevitably treated like garbage. Selective disclosure is the ultimate weapon of the sovereign. When you consciously choose to reveal the architecture of your personal world, you do it agonizingly slowly, in heavily fortified layers. Each new level of access must feel like a rare, calculated privilege. It must be brutally intentional. This cold discipline signals to the observer that your emotional depth is never guaranteed. It is not an automatic right. It is a highly restricted prize, granted solely based on cold observation, flawless consistency, and massive investments of time. The seventh and final fatal flaw, the poison that rots the modern mind, is the catastrophic confusion between raw vulnerability and ironclad integrity. There is a massive, incredibly dangerous misunderstanding heavily promoted by the weak architects of modern society. It is the suicidal belief, swallowed whole by the herd, that absolute, unfiltered emotional exposure is somehow equivalent to strength. They are brainwashed into believing that vomiting every single emotion they experience, that exposing every pathetic insecurity, and broadcasting every tiny emotional reaction is the ultimate sign of authenticity. They falsely believe that if they just stand completely naked and open in front of the firing squad, they are being honorable, real, and trustworthy. But there is a massive, bloody dividing line between pathetic vulnerability and terrifying integrity. Integrity is a weapon. It is the brutal art of controlled transparency. Vulnerability, on the other hand, entirely devoid of strategic control, is nothing but suicidal emotional exposure. True integrity dictates that your spoken words, your calculated actions, and your hidden values operate in absolute, unbreakable alignment. It means you possess the power to be devastatingly honest, without ever being stupidly careless. It means you can appear completely open while remaining entirely impenetrable and stable. You are perfectly real, but you are never, ever emotionally unpredictable to the herd. When you lose control over your emotional leaks, you actively transfer your sovereign power into the hands of your enemies. When you express every fleeting doubt, every irrational fear, every passing moment of insecurity, the observers do not view you as a brave, transparent hero. They view you as a fragile, emotionally dependent liability. Your reactions become a completely predictable algorithm. Your pressure points glow in the dark. Your entire emotional state becomes a desperately open book. And the supreme rule of the Machiavellian game is this: whatever is easily readable is effortlessly manipulated. The truth of this reality, the cold, brutal architecture of the world, is something the sleeping masses will never, ever comprehend. You do not lose your crown because the enemy is inherently smarter than you. You do not forfeit your empire because they are louder or more aggressive. And you absolutely do not fall to your knees because the universe is somehow unfair. You lose your absolute sovereignty. You bleed out your power. The exact second you allow yourself to become easy to read. You die when your internal chaos is exposed too quickly to the wolves. You surrender when your reactions become a predictable, pathetic pattern. You are slaughtered when your private struggles, your hidden doubts, and your softest pressure points become painfully visible to any predator paying attention. The real masters of this reality, the top 1% of 1%, we do not hide in the shadows because we are afraid. We control the shadows. We dictate exactly what is revealed. exactly when it strikes the light, and exactly who bleeds to earn the right to see it. Honesty is not a weakness. Kindness is not a flaw. Careless, undisciplined exposure is the only true weakness. The sovereign mind grows infinitely more powerful when every single word is a heavily measured weapon. When every reaction is a delayed, calculated strike, this is the ultimate peak of strategic presence. You become a monolith of ice under crushing pressure. You become an unsolvable, terrifying puzzle to those who observe you. And when they cannot predict your next move, they absolutely cannot control you. You become the architect, and they become the subjects. But what I have just handed to you is merely the surface of the water. It is the absolute bare minimum required to stop bleeding out in the public square. The true, terrifying mechanics of absolute psychological domination, the dark alchemy required to actively reverse engineer the minds of your enemies and bend their reality to your absolute will, cannot be spoken of in the open. The artificial algorithms of this platform, built entirely to protect the fragile sensibilities of the herd, will censor the actual truth. They will erase the forbidden protocols. The real education, the dangerous architecture of the mind, only exists behind the iron gates. If you are finally tired of being prey, if you are truly ready to weaponize your own shadow and ascend to the throne, you must secure your access. Subscribe. Join the inner circle. Step into the void where the real power is forged. Before the herd realizes what we are building, the choice is yours. Remain predictable or become dangerous.